Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Skills and Abilities. So I've already gone over Cyclone Armor, I've gone over Twister, I've gone over Tornado, and now we are going to take a look at Hurricane. So Hurricane is the last in the tree of the cold, I guess, the wind side of the elemental tree, whereas the other side is considered the fire side. These two trees are independent of each other now. They used to be linked together, but now in 2.4, the Armageddon and the Hurricane skills no longer lead into each other, which is definitely very nice. Now, this particular tree is usually built together, and the reason is because, well, they all synergize with each other. So if you're building Hurricane, you usually will build Twister and Tornado. If you're building Tornado, you're usually building Twister and Hurricane. If you're building Twister, you're usually building Tornado and Hurricane. And all of them synergize together, so all of them work very well together. And also, as you can see, Cyclone Armor adds a duration bonus to Hurricane, which makes it last longer, which can definitely be very useful in certain situations. Now, Hurricane is cold damage, and it can be seen fairly easily. If you put the ability on the screen, you'll see that it is cold damage. It also says that it is cold damage right on the skill. And Hurricane is a very simple ability. When you cast it, it goes around your character, and it does damage basically kind of like per tick. And anything that walks within the Hurricane can take this tick damage relatively easily. It's a rather small range, but it will hit anything within the radius and do a pretty substantial amount of damage in the process. Now, because it is practically melee range, and I feel like this is important because a lot of people I think don't realize this, is that Hurricane is pretty much melee range. If I was a melee character and I was attacking, you will notice that that attacking in melee range is about the same exact amount of range that Hurricane is. Like, for instance, if I go over here with these guys and I chase them down, you'll notice that it's just basically the right amount of range to get into and hit the targets. This is actually a good thing, though, because the other abilities that accompany Hurricane are very poor in terms of pathing, and I talked about this in the previous videos, but Tornado doesn't really ever go where you actually want it to go. Twister also doesn't really ever go exactly where you want it to go, and both of them are really only very effective in close range. So if you do plan to build this particular character, being in melee range is actually helpful because, number one, it allows you to get your Hurricane ability off, and it also allows you to utilize your Tornado and your Twister abilities more effective. I can barely ever get my Tornadoes to go where I want them to. It takes a little bit of a knack, and even after you figure it out, it still is really not quite exactly what you would want. Now, Hurricane recently got some buffs in the way that it can now be cast while you are in werewolf form. Werewolf and bear form. So when you are in werewolf and bear form, you can now actually cast Cyclone Armor and Hurricane while you are in those forms. And this means that you can potentially have a very interesting hybrid build between a melee and a hurricane bear or a hurricane wolf, which is very interesting. This particular one is actually that. He is actually a hurricane bear. He utilizes several abilities which allow him to emit twisters and tornadoes, all of which can be very, very interesting. And thankfully, to the new patch in 2.4, he's gotten some very, very nice buffs in many, many different ways. Number one, and first and foremost, is the ability to cast Hurricane while actually in the bear form. Another is, of course, the ability to cast Cyclone Armor while in the bear form. And then on top of that, they also threw him another buff in the form of adding stun damage to the Twister. So this particular build has seen quite a lot of very fun changes. Now, when it comes to Hurricane's damage, you can kind of see how it applies. It obviously applies a chilling effect. It hits multiple times. So when they are inside, they are getting constantly hit over and over again, and it's very, very nice. Unfortunately, because cold tends to be one of the elements that is relatively unbreakable, you're probably not going to be able to break a cold immune monster, but you do have Twister and Tornado, which are physical damage, to pair it up with. And if you utilize something that has amplified damage or decrepify, you will most likely get some very nice effect out of this. Your main downside is going to be something that has physical and cold immunity at the same time. Those are going to be difficult to fight. And it is important to note that if you want Hurricane to last for a considerable amount of time, you do have to actually get the Cyclone Armor buff, which is not exactly a bad thing because Cyclone Armor provides a huge absorption from elemental damage, fire, lightning, and ice, which basically just gives you free HP versus those particular elements. So when you are hit by any kind of damage, which is fire, lightning, or ice, it is absorbed by Cyclone Armor first before anything. But this also increases the duration of Hurricane, which can last up to 50 seconds when it's maxed out, which is pretty darn cool. And used to be a bigger deal because if you did want to build a kind of a hybrid bear slash, Hurricane or werewolf Hurricane, basically what you had to do is you had to actually have this really long duration because, otherwise you would have to change back all the time, recast your Hurricane, change back, recast your Hurricane, change back, recast your Hurricane, change back, recast your Hurricane, and it got rather tedious. So having the extra duration is certainly very useful, and it really works out very well for a melee character because, as we talked about earlier, Hurricane is really a melee range kind of a skill. It's very close quarters, and running around as a melee character to dish out damage really kind of works very well for this particular character. Of course, it's going to suffer in certain zones like Crystalline Passage and whatnot, but it's going to do fairly well in other zones where there are less cold immunes, and that's really all there is to it. If we go to Lost City, for instance, I can cast up. And I can get my ravens running too, because why not? Get some extra blinding effects in there. And as I run around, I mean, you're going to notice that I can pretty much just destroy just about everything I come across, either by the cold damage of the Hurricane, the physical damage of my attack, the extra proccing effects of Twister, and my mercenary, and it all kind of works out very beautifully with this this kind of a character. Whether you're a pure Hurricane Druid or whether you're a Hurricane Bear or a Hurricane Wolf, it's all very interesting, and I feel like this particular skill is just a very fun one in general because it just makes you just this force to be reckoned with, right? Oh, some silk weaves. What do you know? Oh, silky weaves. The weaves of the silkiness. Do I not have any room at all in here? Oh yeah, I got that head. I love finding random items while I'm doing a video. This is online, by the way, so I'm totally going to use these on somebody. Oh, let me have some silk weaves. There's a coronet over here, too. What's that? +2 martial arts. Well, there's really not a lot more to talk about when it comes to Hurricane. These are very excellent abilities, and each one of these abilities does have to be used in tandem with the others to make this really work out. And I do feel like that if you are interested in this particular ability in Hurricane, I recommend that you watch the other videos on Tornado, Twister, and Cyclone Armor, because all of these are linked together kind of intrinsically. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, and keep watching.